How could two trains on the same track heading straight toward each other without anyone stopping them? On October 15, 1994, in the quiet countryside of Kent, a normal day turned into a nightmare. 5 people lost their lives and many were left wondering, how did this happen? Was it a simple human error or something more? In this video, we reveal the chilling details of the Cowden Train Collision, a disaster that changed train safety in England forever. Cowden is a small village in southern England, located between Eastbourne and London. The village has a train station on the Oxted line, which connects London to Grinstead and Uckfield. The line splits at Hurst Green, forming a Y shape, with one branch going to East Grinstead and the other to Uckfield. While the section from London to East Grinstead was electrified between 1983 and 1987. The branch from Hurst Green to Uckfield, however, remained unelectrified. Train 2E27 was traveling from Uckfield to Oxted, while Train 2E24 was heading from Oxted to Uckfield. Both were regional passenger services running in opposite directions. Each train was made up of 2 BR British Rail, Class 205 diesel units. These trains, introduced in 1957, were designed with 3 cars and measured 191 feet long, weighing 118 tons. Train 2E27 was operated by driver Mr. Barton and guard Mr. Brett Andrews. Train 2E24 had driver Mr. Rees and guard Mr. Boyd. The guard, similar to a conductor, is responsible for overseeing the passengers and train operations. At 8:25 a.m. on October 15, 1994, Train 2E27 left Asher Station, heading north to Oxted. However, the single-track section between Ashurst and Hever was already occupied by the southbound train 2E24. Despite this, 2E27 went past a red signal and entered the section, which it wasn't supposed to. The points, which were set for 2E24, had to switch when 2E27 passed through, causing an alert at the Oxted signal box. The signalman at Oxted immediately understood the alert, knowing that 2E24 had already disappeared into the thick fog on the same track. Unfortunately, there was no radio system on the line, so he couldn't contact the drivers directly. He tried to call the driver of 2E24 using a phone on a signal post, but the driver likely couldn't hear it over the engine noise. Realizing a collision was about to happen and with no way to stop it, the signalman called emergency services, reporting the crash that was seconds away. The 2 trains, only a mile apart, moved toward each other and crashed head-on at 8:27 a.m., while emergency services were being alerted. The front car of Train 2E24 smashed into Train 205018, pushing its frame backward and tearing it apart. The front of 2E24 was crushed inward by 6 feet before the car tipped onto its side. Both drivers, Mr. Brett Andrews, and 2 passengers died in the crash, and 13 others were injured. Mr. Boyd, the guard at the back of the train, felt a bump and thought the train had hit something. When he looked out the window, he saw that some cars ahead had come off the tracks. Since he couldn't move between the cars from the inside, he walked along the outside of the train to what he thought was the front. He found an empty driver's cab and believed that Mr. Rees had gone ahead to signal other trains for safety. Boyd took some warning devices detonators from the cab and placed them on the tracks further up as a safety step. After checking on the passengers, he walked back to Cowden Station to report what had happened. It wasn't until he spoke to the Oxted signal box that he realized a crash had happened. The empty cab he saw was actually the rear cab of Train 2E27, and he had unknowingly walked past the wreckage, hidden by bushes. When Mr. Boyd returned to the crash site, the shock overwhelmed him, and he was later taken to the hospital for severe trauma. Investigators found a key clue while examining the wreckage of 205018. Both Mr. Barton, the driver, and Mr. Brett Andrews, the guard, were discovered in the driver's cab, even though the guard should not have been there at the time. It was known that Mr. Brett Andrews had been hoping to become a train driver and often visited the cab to watch or talk to the driver. Even though he had been warned 3 times not to do this, he kept doing it. Investigators couldn't be sure if Mr. Barton was driving at the time of the crash, which raised the possibility that Mr. Brett Andrews, who wasn't trained, could have been driving. Even if he was just talking to Mr. Barton, it might have been a distraction that contributed to the crash. Another problem was that neither train had onboard radios. If they had radios, the signalman at Oxted could have made a quick call to warn the drivers and stop the collision, as he had enough time to do so, possibly preventing the disaster. The investigation found that the signal ignored by train 2E27 was dirty, making it harder to see in the fog. This poor visibility, along with the absence of trap points, which could have derailed the train to protect the single track line, contributed to the accident. It was also unclear why the automatic warning system, AWS, on train 2E27 didn't alert the driver. Normally, this system gives a warning when a train passes a red signal, and if the driver doesn't respond, the brakes are applied automatically. Investigators found that the trackside parts of the system were working, but they couldn't fully check the system on the train because of the damage. It's possible the driver pressed the acknowledgement button without realizing it, or the system may have had a problem. Even though some parts of the system were tested and seemed to be working, the investigators couldn't recreate the exact situation, leaving some unanswered questions. The 1994 Cowden Train Collision remains a tragic reminder of the importance of safety in rail travel. While modern trains and systems have come a long way since that fateful day, the question still lingers. Could more have been done to prevent such a disaster? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think more changes are needed to prevent future accidents?